Now, though, to oil. The price of oil shaping up to be a major factor in how the war is conducted, with Donald Trump warning Iran that they will be hit 20 times harder if they try and stop the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. As he took to the lectern earlier today and signalled the war was all but won, many analysts argued it was the risk of an oil shock that prompted the president's comments. And the impact of his press conference, it was immediate. Oil prices fell some 9.5%. They're now well and truly under $100 a barrel. The market, though, is still jittery here and in the United States. I suspect his declaration of victory today was as much about quietening down the share market and the oil price, but also he's got an eye on his MAGA base. They don't like these forever wars. And, of course, he's got the midterms later this year. Joining me now to discuss all of this, MST marquee energy analyst Saul Kavonik. Saul, as I said then, the president's press conference, it was extraordinary. They ran sort of a ticker tape of the share market underneath it, and it was immediate. His words caused the price of oil to fall. It settled down the market. It certainly had an impact here as well. He says it's all but won. Others are saying this could be months before things settle down. Give me your expert view.
Well, as you say, it was the biggest intraday swing in oil prices in the history since oil prices have been recorded. And it's not every day that you see a comment by a president or anyone else manages to cause a $3 trillion a year market move by 30% in a matter of minutes. Now, as you say, I think this is rhetoric coming from Trump. He's trying to take some pressure off the oil prices, given the political and economic implications of the spiking oil prices over the weekend. But if you take in totality some of the comments that Trump said, where he did talk about the war being essentially over sooner rather than later, but at the same time talking about threatening Iran by going much harder if they continue to block the Strait of Hormuz, and the need potentially for the US and allies to provide Navy escorts to the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, you don't talk about, you're not going to be planning these kind of military campaigns and escorts if you're also planning for the war to be over next week. So I think we need to take these comments with a bit of a grain of salt. And ultimately, as it stands today, the war is still on an escalatory pathway. Passage to the Strait of Hormuz is down to a trickle. Supply for both LNG and oil is being shut in more and more on a daily basis. And that does portend the biggest impact on oil markets we have ever seen, even bigger than the oil shocks we saw in the 1970s.
A couple of questions before I move on to some domestic issues here. Given that a lot of these tankers are foreign flagged, if the US Navy is going to be in the Straits and defending foreign flagged ships, is that something you think the Americans are going to be comfortable with? And also, I guess, with these tankers and with supply, are we going to see an immediate impact? I mean, there were issues with insurance. So there's one thing to put the Navy there, but a lot of them can't get insurance to insure the stock of oil in the tanker. Now, the president said that's got to be worked on inside the bureaucracy in the United States. How's that also moving, Sol?
So there's three things here. The first one is insurance. There are plans underway, hope and expecting that there'll be an insurance offering resolution, if not the end of this week, by next week. The second part then is military Navy escorts. The issue with Navy escorts is, as Iran has already threatened to do, Iran will attack the first convoy that goes through with everything that they've got. And if they're successful, that could put a halt or stymie the entire convoy system. But lastly, and I think this is what's underestimated, even with a successful convoy system, you can't, because convoys are slower, you cannot return to full passage to the Strait of Hormuz. So it will still be limited to 50 to 70% rates. And if you take this in totality, you can see how a convoy system plus some diversions through the Red Sea could restore a lot of oil supply, which in addition to the petroleum reserves being released, can buy us several months for oil. But for LNG, There is no alternatives to the Strait of Hormuz, and LNG is going to be impacted and is already being impacted much faster and much harder than oil is.
Okay, let's talk about what Australia should have here in terms of stock. We've got the International Energy Agency Treaty. We're signed up to that. We're supposed to have 90 days worth of supply in this country. The Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, says we're absolutely where we need to be and we are meeting that requirement. But I understand we're not. We haven't got 90 days of stock in Australia. Some of that stock, we're about 50%, I'm told, 50 days, sorry. Some of that stock is still on its way or potentially offshore and could be brought here. What's the truth?
Well, Australia's a major laggard here. We're only about half the 90-day level compared to every other OECD country, which meets or exceeds those stock levels by and large. So, I mean, that's one part of things. I think Chris Bowen does have a point, though, where, counting storage, for example, overseas doesn't really count if you've got a major maritime disruption, and we need to see more focus here. The truth is the reason Australia is in such a precarious state regarding its fuel security and supply chains there is because we don't produce anywhere near the level of oil that we're used to. So we're now almost entirely dependent on imports. And a big part of it has been we've had a hostile policy environment, which made it very hard to get approval to build new oil projects and explore for new oil in Australia. The best way to shield ourselves from international shocks in oil markets is to be self-sufficient in oil, but we're becoming increasingly more reliant on imports because we're seeing a decline in production and an inability to invest to replenish that.
Yes, because we've got fossil fuel phobia. So that's what we've got, fossil fuel phobia. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.